The idea that saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease has led to a global cholesterol-lowering industry, an industry that generates at least $29 billion each year from medications and specially developed foods that lower cholesterol levels.
Alto el colesterol.
The majority of this relatively new industry is associated with a group of medications known as statins. One statin, Lipitor, generated more than $13 billion in 2006 for the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer. Some authorities have referred to statins as wonder drugs that save thousands of lives each year, and more than 40 million people now take them.
Statins have become one of the most widely prescribed categories of drugs in medical history, and so we know a lot about them.
Dr. Peter Langstjerne has been practicing cardiology since 1985. After 5 years of cardiology at the University of Texas Health Center, he set up a private cardiology practice in Tyler, Texas, where he has worked for the past 21 years. Since 1983, Dr. Langstjerne has been involved with the clinical application of coenzyme Q10. We asked Dr. Langstjerne to explain how statins work and how statins affect coenzyme Q10 levels within the human body.
They are a drug that blocks a biochemical pathway in all cells, very high up in the pathway. It blocks the production of a compound called mevalonate. That's the precursor for many other compounds. When you block this pathway, you block the ability of cells to biosynthesize cholesterol. Well, there's many branches on this pathway. Think of it as a tree, and you're cutting it off at the trunk. All the branches will be affected. Not only do you lower cholesterol, you lower other compounds. One of those that we know a lot about is this coenzyme Q. So if you take a statin and you decrease cholesterol levels, let's say by 40 or even 50%, which they're capable of doing, you're going to have a 40 or 50% reduction in CoQ10. It's not avoidable. It's the same pathway. So cells that are active 24 hours a day, every day, very active, and that would be heart muscle cells. They don't rest day or night. They use a huge amount of energy, and therefore heart muscle has the highest concentration of CoQ10, by far.
We have the unfortunate effect, therefore, that by giving a statin to try and reduce cholesterol, we may well be blocking one of the most important molecules in the function of heart muscle. So in effect, while statins may be acting, they think, in a good way, we've got very ample evidence that by blocking CoQ10, we are probably raising the risk of heart muscle failure and therefore heart attacks from a different avenue other than arterial blockage.
Most drugs, if they're going to affect you adversely, you can tell it within a day. You swallow the pill and 30 minutes later you throw up or have diarrhea or have a rash, and then you know not to take it again. Statins are insidious because their side effects begin very gradually over a period of months to years.
My experience shows that statin side effects can be very subtle. They can involve other organ systems. They can present themselves months to maybe years after starting the statin, so it's not necessarily within a short time frame. And by that time, usually a patient gets diagnosed as having a whole new disease, and then they're put on a whole new drug.
For the first 11 years of her career, Dr. Catherine Faraday was a medical officer in the US Navy. She now specializes in dermatology and has a private practice in Austin, Texas.
I took Lipitor for 2 years, and I was fairly sick during that whole period of time. After I stopped taking Lipitor, it took me another 2 to 3 years to get to where I started to feel back to normal. Although most of my dramatic symptoms had gone away, I still had memory issues, which I still have to this day, and my energy levels took a long time to come back. I would be saying something to a patient, and then suddenly the next word would not come. In fact, my whole mind would go blank for a couple of seconds. It was like a whiteout. That was frightening. I didn't know what that was, and again I thought, well, maybe it's just stress. I've been working pretty hard, but at the back of my mind, I started to fear that maybe I was starting to get early Alzheimer's. I couldn't say the word, but that was my fear. I went home and I stayed home for 3 weeks. I was totally exhausted and depleted, emotionally and physically. And all I could do was stay in bed. It was an effort to get out of bed. I was afraid to get out of bed. I've never been so fearful in my life. In fact, fear was the only emotion I had. I couldn't feel happiness. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't even remember being happy. That was the worst I'd ever felt in my life.
Didn't notice anything for about 6 months, and then started to get a lot of pain, muscle aches and insomnia, and I started to feel really genuinely unwell, as if I had flu. I started to keep a diary about statins because my memory loss was so bad. I thought I ought to write this down because no one's ever going to believe it. So I'll just read you a little bit about what I wrote in my diary at the time. I get lots of depression, light sensitivity, amnesia, unable to write, chest pains, leg pains, incredible fatigue, and some days I can't get my legs out of bed. Symptoms are getting worse, and I need to find out what's going on, as I think I am dying. It goes on and on and on like this, and it's quite scary actually, because I would never remembered any of this. I'm so glad I wrote it down, and I urge other people to write theirs down as well, write down what happened to them.
My friends sort of thought I was putting it on, and it weren't until we were up in Alicante actually with 4 of us having a stroll around Alicante. My walking started to get very tiring, tired legs, and I was having to stop and saying to them, look, you beat a lot, I'll catch up with you sooner or later, because I just couldn't keep up with them. But the memory thing, that's perhaps one of the worst facets of it. I was always sharp, very sharp as a razor. Like I said, I've been in business on and off all my life. I'd remember telephone numbers, you don't have to tell it, but I'd got it, well, that's it, done. I wouldn't have to think about it. I could go away and think I'd forgotten it and stand there and think, oh yeah, that's it. And I'd have it right. Today I couldn't do that, it would be impossible.
I went to see my doctor, and I kept telling him I found it very difficult at work. I was forgetting lots and lots of things and not completing tasks. And he just said, oh, well, you're getting old. You know, we all do that. It happens to all of us when we get to this age. I was 51.
And it just got to the point where life was pretty near unbearable. Constant pain gets you, feeling not well gets you. Waking up in the morning, not feeling rested and thinking, oh, whoopee, another day. Waking up and thinking, oh, Christ, another day.
There were times when I wondered if I really wanted to go on living. I mourned my health. I felt that I had lost my health. And I felt sorry that I hadn't done things like travel and all those things you think you're going to do. And I felt so sorry that I hadn't done that before I'd lost my health. Now, as I'm trying to be healthy, I'm trying to get enough sleep, I'm trying to manage my stress levels, I'm trying to exercise regularly. My cholesterol continues to be very high. However, I've had several echocardiograms, stress tests, EKGs. Nothing's ever showed any evidence of heart disease. So far I'm doing okay.
When you stop statins, it takes a long while to get over. Some people get over it fairly quickly, but by and large, to feel any real relief takes, I would say, a minimum of a year, because that's how I'm starting to feel better. There's just so many of us now. We're all sharing the same symptoms.
I was involved partly in a study in Holland, where they asked 50,000 people how many people took statins, what were the side effects. They reckoned it was 30 to 35% of people got significant side effects. Other studies have shown 20%, some studies have shown less. But I personally believe it's in around 20% of people suffer significant adverse events.
I honestly don't believe that doctors do recognize statin side effects, even when they're sitting right in front of them. In the middle of my 2-year illness, I saw my internist for our annual check, After briefly noting that I was seeing several specialists for my dry eye problem, my arrhythmia problem, my colitis problem, and my depression, she then got to the heart of the visit, which was that she was delighted that my cholesterol levels were under control. I find it ironic that neither she nor I ever stopped to question why a relatively young, healthy person had suddenly developed 5 new illnesses in 1 year. And the only new thing in my life was Lipitor.
It's not only possible that GPs aren't reporting adverse effects, it's certain that they aren't. All studies done on reporting of adverse events around the world of drugs have shown that the average reporting varies between 1 to 5%. Most people think it's actually considerably less than that. I would think it's likely that about 1 in 200 adverse events are actually reported. Probably less.